Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to another week of Coach's Corner Health. I am one of your co hosts, Leslie Goddard. I'm a mindset and emotional awareness coach for women who are on a mission to change their world. And they decide that they want to actually adopt a both and mindset by keeping what they love to do, which is their corporate job, and adding more flavor to their life, which is their passion project. I show them how by developing mindset tools, learning how to manage their emotions so they protect their time and they get more done efficiently, having more time to have fun time and quality time with their loved ones. Andy, over to you.
Beautiful. I love that. I love it every time. Thank you. I'm Andy Lidstone. I'm your other co-host. I'm a boundaries coach. I help people with all kinds of different relationships. And one of my boundaries today is, well, I kind of crossed one of the boundaries that I have is to show up for these things on time. Um, I I ran into some technical difficulties and some scheduling difficulties, and here I am at a good 5 minutes late, and I'm also on vacation, so I don't have my typical advanced setup that I have at home. I have scruffy looking Andy, which I kind of like. This is vacation Andy. So, welcome to the show.
Awesome.
Welcome to our conversation. Today, we're talking
Yes.
about the power of influence. We're talking about what young adults can do or how they can change the world and whether or not they should even try. So, what's
Yeah.
your thoughts? Let's get it started, Leslie. What do you figure?
Whew, yeah. So, well, in honor of today, as I was telling Andy before we went on live, I decided to wear my, I guess, kind of slightly controversial sweatshirt. It says whatever. And on the sleeve, it says don't care. And that's really about, for me, I think it really kind of lends to this conversation we're going to have because really creating culture means that you are going to create it based on how you feel and how you see the world. So that's why I
Yes.
wanted to wear this in honor of that today. And I'm really excited because I think this really is, I think, going to be a fun conversation because I know we both have actually at some point in our own lives. Yes, we are not teenagers still, we're not young adults still, but we've gone through the process, so we know what it's like to create culture within our own lifetimes. So I'm excited for
Yes.
today.
Yeah, exactly. And as much as it might seem like to my children that I was born or hatched as an adult, I actually did go through those stages. We both went through those childhood and young adult and teenager stages. And therefore, we remember what it was like to have some of this influence, and we remember what it was like when our peers were having influence that maybe they shouldn't have had, or maybe it's a good thing they did have, or whatever the case may be, right? So, you know, in every generation, there's always a few people who are doing some wonderful things, and a few people who are doing Tide Pod kinds of things, and um, it's what I wanted to talk about is why do we want to do that? Why is it important? Why is it relevant? And kind of what power do they have? What power do young adults? And by young adult, I'm talking about the, kind of 18 to 25 age group. What power do they have, and why do they have this power? So my thoughts on that
Great
are
question. And yeah, great question.
right. My thoughts on that are the young adults do have a lot of power to create culture because the other generations, for the most part, have either settled into their lives. So when we get past about 25, 30 years old, we've got families and careers, and we're not so much worried about those things that we were once passionate about. We're worried about, the immediate things that affect our immediate lives. So what's going on in the greater world, or even what's going on in the communities around us, like we're less concerned about those things as we are in our immediate neighborhood and our families, right? And or our careers, if that's where our focus is at. So we tend to focus more small scale in that middle age or that middle range group, not middle age, but it's not until we don't start getting back into that global stage until we're in our 40s and 50s, when our families are and our careers are well established, and starting to do their own thing again. So that young adult, that 18 to 25, is a prime period When we care about things, we do things, we want to do things, and sometimes we're not sure what we want to do or what we can do. So, what's your thoughts? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm having a little bit of internet connection issues today. Actually, I've been having a few internet connection issues for the last couple of weeks. So it is what it is, right? But yeah, and of course, of all conversations for it to decide is going to be a little brat.
Right,
But
right.
yeah, again, maybe the internet is trying to create its own culture. So, but yeah, I agree with you. I think as young, especially when we're about 18 to 25, it's that we're still forming our opinions, we're learning, and we're deciding what kind of an adult we want to be, because we're now stepping out of those teen years where there's been a lot of structure, and now we're like stepping into a world where we're being given the opportunity to give our ideas, especially if you go on to like college or university. Well, I mean, even if you go into the workforce, but still, when you go into college and university, that's when the lifestyle becomes more about, okay, you are given the responsibility to keep yourself
Yes,
accountable to going to school. And then,
yes,
of course, you can then have your ideas heard and you can share with your peers and you learn about life and deciding. And I think that's where you really start to really open up your dreaming again. Because I think as young kids, we dream, but this is where we become, we start having those adult um, decisions based around like what we see as our future, so that they become really creative in how they're starting to think. But I do believe they do create that culture, and whether it's stepping into college or university or into a job, and they step into an environment, now they're surrounded by many other people, many other voices that they probably would not have been around except for putting themselves into the situation. And so now this is where they can
right.
start creating that culture, because they start sharing ideas and deciding together if they agree and let's do this, or maybe
Yes,
they want to change it to something else. So yeah, I think it becomes more of a different kind of community. It was before, like up to 18, and they're in high school, they're still in a structured environment. It's still really home based, surrounding community around where they're living, where they're growing up, that those types of interactions. But once they get out into the world, I think that's when the community changes. It becomes more of worldview thoughts. I think that's where things start to
yes,
change, because not no it's
yeah,
not just about family anymore. It's not just about where I live anymore. It's about, okay, I'm now deciding what I want to do, where I want to go, how I want to live,
right,
how I see the
right.
future.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. As they were going through their teenage years, they were starting to see more and more what's going on around the world around them. And as they grew up, they started seeing a bigger and bigger picture. So as they get into this young adult life, they're seeing a bigger picture than what they saw before, and they're wanting to have a piece of that picture. They're wanting to have some influence on that. They're wanting to have a say. And for the most part, while as they're going through university or starting their jobs or starting their families or the things that whatever lifestyle they choose to do first, um, they're deciding how they want to influence the world around them. Like they're deciding how they, like, whether or not they vote, and if they vote, who they vote for, and what things they care about and what things they're passionate about. And like you said a minute ago, this is where they're reminded of the dreams they have as children, or that they had as children. They're like, I once wanted to be this. What does that actually look like now that I'm an adult, and I've gone through some high school, and I have some idea of what this could actually look like. Now how do I translate that, and what does the world look like now? What does my life look like now? What is the culture around me? What is the country I live in, the people I talk to? What does that all mean to me, and what do I want it to mean? And I think this is some of the decisions that some of these people are going through, and I think a lot of that they're doing kind of by accident. right? They're
Mm-hmm.
just, hanging out with their buddies and doing their things, and they don't realize how much of an influence that has on the grand culture of things, right?
Yeah.
I
I
think a
think,
lot of the I think a lot of the times they don't realize just what the effect is of some of their decisions.
yeah. And I think it's because I think when I remember back to that time, it's not really been that long ago. But when
Right?
I think back
It was
on
only a
those
couple of days ago for
times,
me.
just a couple of days. But I think as I reflect back on that time, it wasn't really that I was thinking about what anyone else would think about what I was
Right.
dreaming about. I
Right.
wasn't looking at it from the world, looking back through a mirror at me to say, well, I don't know if I agree with your ideas or what you're thinking of
Right.
doing because I've said this before. My journey through, especially my 20s, going out and just like forging this career, like deciding what I wanted to do and going after it. The word no never ever even entered my mind. So I think it's
Right.
really an interesting thing when you look at how young people really operate because we think that you would think that that might be on the radar, and maybe it
Right.
is. I don't know, but I know for myself personally, it was never anything I ever thought about. I never think about,
Right.
oh well, someone's going to push back. It was, well,
Right.
what do I want? I've always kind of been that kind of that person.
Right. Right.
And so yeah, I'm curious. It would have been kind of neat if I had a young son or a young daughter right now that I could turn to and say, hey, like, what are your thoughts on how you're creating culture and how are you doing it? I mean, you have kids, you have a son and a
Yes.
daughter.
Yes. My kids are actually 23 and 24, so they're right in this age group that we're talking about. And what I've noticed both in growing up myself and in with my children, and as I saw other generations going through this stage, there's kind of two distinctive perspectives. And one is, I want the world to change, and these are your activists and your passionate people, and they have a very distinct opinion on how things have got to go from here forward, and they want the world to be this and they want the world to be that, whether it's climate change or traditional values, or whatever it is, whether they want wokeism or whatever the thing that you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
There what I've noticed is that each of the people in this category, each of the individuals in this category, have kind of picked a different stance to stand up for. And then there's the other category of those people who are like, I just want to opt out. I just want to back out. Like, I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to have a say. I don't want to be influenced. I don't want to influence. I don't want my opinion to matter in this way. I just want to go about my
Mm-hmm.
life. Like, I don't want people looking at what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my kids are. Depending on the subject, they're in one or the other of those two categories. Um, there are some subjects where either of my kids will stand up and say, no, this has got to be this way. And there are most subjects my kids are like, should I care? Like, why should I care? I don't
Mm-hmm.
really care. Um, and what I've discovered myself in when I was growing up, I felt very alone and abandoned and criticized and like the nerd, right? In the 70s, in the 60s and 70s, being the nerd was a horrible thing to be. But in the 80s, it turns out that like the majority of us were nerds. So as we became adults into the 90s and the 2000s, um, we ended up taking over. Like, it was our rejected and lonely personalities that ended up influencing the latest parts of the last century, right? And right through today, it's still to this day cool to be the nerd. Like, everybody wants to identify as the nerd. I'm the science nerd. I'm a little bit nerdy about this, or I'm a little bit nerdy about yoga is something I've like. Who gets nerdy about yoga, right? It's not a
Mm-hmm.
nerdy thing. Like it's that people are identifying as nerds because it's now the cool thing to do, right? But when I
Mm-hmm.
was growing up, it we were the rejects. We were the left out ones, and so um, even though I didn't think I was participating in culture. I was one of like literally millions of kids that was creating a culture we didn't even know was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's often the case with that second group of kids who want to, want to opt out, or don't think they have an influence or don't want to have an influence. They tend to have the biggest influence. They're the ones who tend to create more cult cultural impact. They're the ones that tend to have more power of decision because they just do what they want. And it turns out that a large portion of kids in that age group, and I say kids, they're not actually kids anymore, as we mentioned at the start, they're adults. But I say kids because in comparison to my age now, they're still children, right? But
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of them don't realize the power of the influence that they have. And what they don't realize is that there is a vast majority of other people their age making those same decisions and doing those same things. And it just becomes, they don't realize until 10 or 20 years later that, wait a minute, that was our culture. That was what we did. And I thought I was doing it by myself and maybe a couple of friends and maybe four or five buddies. And, at most there's a few of us, a handful of us. But it turns out that later on in life, you realize that, wait a minute, this was a thing. This was a culture. Like this was who we were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the part that we don't really understand, that when we opt out, we're actually joining the majority because the majority do opt out. But what the decisions we're making are still in common with so many other people who are making those decisions.
Yeah. And it's the thing is, I think a lot of people don't look outside of like maybe music and art and that as
As
creating
culture.
culture,
Yes.
because we know music creates like the grind. When you I remember, like, there was the 80s was like the era of the hair bands, and then all of a sudden into the 90s you get the grunge bands, and now you're getting now progressive rock. More progressive rock has become the thing.
Yes.
And but then you also have the generation now, even into like, preteen or teenage years, like when like, between like 8 and say 13 years old, who are now being turned on to music from, our when we were
Yeah.
growing up. So
Yeah.
they're now creating a new culture around that. In fact, if
Yeah.
you look as an example, you go onto YouTube here and you'll find people, young people, older people, who have channels based on first experience of hearing a band or hearing a singer,
Yes. Yes.
and they're doing their thing. They're like, it's like they are showcasing music and unwrapping it for people, because it's their own experience for the first time. And yet, this is music that's been around for a long time. And I think so. That's
Right.
another type of culture. You've got the YouTube culture. I grew up as, you know, I really wasn't sure what kind of culture I was in, other
Right.
than maybe I was part of the culture that was like the culture of I don't see the word no as being an option. Maybe that
Right.
was culture for me because I went after everything I wanted, pretty much up until really into my mid 40s. Really, I still did it.
Yeah.
As I got older from there, that's when things started to become a little different, where I was becoming more frustrated because I wasn't
Right.
making those choices. But I think even myself, like today, I can just to give you an example, getting into coaching, um, was a lot to do with not losing relevance going into my 50s. I
Right.
didn't want to lose relevance. I wanted to still stay relevant. I still wanted to stay visible. I looked at someone who was 50 and above as that community of people who then became forgotten. They were there,
Right.
you knew they were there, but you didn't really pay attention to them. And I wanted to change that. Was part of like the reason why I decided I wanted to look for something else, because I wanted to change that. So maybe that is part of, changing culture, creating culture,
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
that, around young people and people our age coming together. So that's creating a new dynamic. So creating culture based on ideas and learning how to still be creative when you're older and not look at it from an experience point of view, but looking at it from like what's possible, like not even
Yes.
knowing what's possible, but looking to with hope for what's possible. And I think that's what a lot of young people do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the key. One of the key characteristics of that age group, no matter what generation we're talking about, is they come into the world with hope.
Mm-hmm.
Even those ones that are like the world's going to end and we're all going to crap, and
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing good going to come out of this. Those ones are saying that because they want to change it. And the vast
Yeah.
majority are like coming into the world and they're thinking, look at all this stuff we can change. Look at all this stuff we can fix. Look at all these things that we can play with. Look at all this stuff we can create and design and do. Like the world's a canvas. Let's play with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, like I said before, most people aren't doing that consciously, but some are. And the ones that are have a major influence, right? And then the ones that are doing it, that are kind of trying to stay out, they're being more guided into whatever their culture is based on whatever it was that the culture before them or the generation before them kind of taught them was culture. So, we became the nerd generation, and then the generation right after us was like, well, we just want to work hard, right? So being a nerd wasn't necessarily cool, but it was at the same time, it was like, okay, what kind of a nerd? Like, are you just gonna be the outcast, or do you want to do something with it? Like, are you gonna do something about it? And then it became like, oh, the tech junkies are taking over the world, and all this other stuff, and each generation kind of built on the generation before it, and um, I think what happened coinciding with that, and one of the things that I most enjoyed about the 80s and 90s is that um, the result of the women's lib movements from the 60s and 70s, the women's independence, we started seeing some of
Mm-hmm.
those results. We started seeing women like yourself going, I'm just not going to take no for an answer, and I'm going to make progress. Whereas if a
Mm-hmm.
woman in the 50s just said, I'm not going to take no for an answer, they were still fighting and scratching and biting their way through the ranks, right? Whereas you just got to do the work, and you still had to fight and scratch, but you didn't have to do it as much as your predecessors might have had to. So, and what I'm liking is I'm
Mm-hmm.
able to see with each generation that women are more and more empowered to be able to do the things they want to do. What I'm liking with each generation is that men are more and more in tune with who they are and who they want to be, and each generation wants more of that sort of stuff. Um, but again, how are we influencing this? Like, what does music look like for the next generation? What does art look like for the next generation? But also, what does political correctness look like?
Mm-hmm.
What does the government agencies look like? What do we expect from our governing bodies? What do we expect from our employers? What do we expect from our families? Like, what is the family dynamic right now for most families looks a lot different than it did 2 or 3 generations ago, right? Each generation changes what the family dynamic looks like, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good, right? Just like every cultural change, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. But each culture, each generation chooses the things from the generations before that they want to keep, and they choose which things they want to change. And some of them change, and some of them don't. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think this is part of where we're going with this. Is that as we get into the global world or into that adult life, and we look around and we go like, wait a minute, I'm not living at my parents' place anymore. I'm going to university, or I've met someone and I'm going to start a family, or maybe I want to just get jump right into a career or whatever the thing is, or maybe I'm going to flounder around for a few years until I figure out what it is I'm going to do. Whatever the case may be, we're not looking at just, making my mom and dad happy anymore and following the
Mm-hmm.
rules.
Yeah.
I'm not looking at am I attending school anymore, because even in your university it's not about attendance,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's about, like you said, holding yourself accountable to doing the work. Um, my daughter was just telling me this year that she got a B in a class that she showed up for 2 classes for, and it's not because that she didn't need to show up. It's because all the stuff that they were teaching in class she could get just as easily online, right? So it's not about just, like you said, it's not about the structure anymore. Even when you go to university, when you go to a new job, when you're starting your family, there are some assumed rules in place, but there isn't any written rules like there is in high school, like there is in junior high school, like there is when you're a child or a teenager. There are written rules. When you become an adult, the rules are more assumed and they're more, you know, malleable, and you can play with them a little bit, right? Some of them you
Mm-hmm.
can completely ignore. So as we become adults and we realize that this world's a little bit less what we were told it was going to be, and a little bit more what we hoped it would be, um, we play with those boundaries a little bit. We
Mm-hmm.
want to push limits, and now there's nobody to stop us but ourselves. So when we go to push limits as adults, there's like, what limits do I want to push? It literally is a question, right? So it's, even those of us who decide not to participate in the global culture, we're still, wait a minute, what limits do I want to push? Do I want to get a license? Do I want to drive around? Do I want to get a car? Do I want to, meet a girl or meet a boy? Like, do I want to start a family? Do I want to get a job? Like, what are those? What does that even look like? Like, we're told as kids that this is what future looks like, and then when we get to that future, we're like, I don't know if that's what I want,
Yeah.
right? And so whether we do that on purpose, whether we ask those questions out loud or in our heads consciously, or whether we're kind of subconsciously trying to figure out the answers to those things, the questions are still there, and those are the questions that we still ask.
Yeah, and as you were speaking, it made me think of, so you're probably like this. I consider myself a movie geek. To
Yep.
me, that's a great badge, and I'll wear it with honor
Yes.
because I love movies. In fact, I'll go to a movie I've done this, gone to a movie literally on a Friday night, and the next day I'm there in the morning watching it again because I loved it so much. And I used to go by myself because I didn't want to wait for anybody. I wanted to be there. I'm not waiting for someone else because that meant they could be in control of my time. And it was like, no, I want to show up, I want to go there, and I want to enjoy it without having to worry about it. But one of the things that I really, really, really got my mind like turning, and just like I was like the very first time, and I was like, what? Oh my gosh, right? Because that to me embodies culture because it
Yes.
talks about people really kind of either you are just following along, going about your day to day, allowing life to be what it is, or you are that guy or girl that's decided I want to walk against the traffic. I want to like, sorry, against the people are coming towards me. I want to walk towards them. I don't want to walk away from them. I want to change things. And that movie,
Yes.
just like I said, it opened my eyes, but I got it immediately. I understood
Which movie was that
exactly
again?
the Matrix.
The Matrix. Yes.
I got that completely. The first
Yes.
time I watched it, it clicked. And it clicked for me in
Yes.
such a way. It was like, am I wanting to be that one person who's sitting there complaining about my job, but I go to it every single day. I wake up, go to work, go home, go to sleep, wake up, go to work, go home, go to sleep, and continuously be on that loop. And I hadn't I had realized I wasn't before, but then I became
Right.
that person, and I realized, wow, it made me think, oh, I can watch this in slow motion, my own life, of how I'm
Right.
actually going through my life. Do I want to make changes? And, that really, as I said, it opened up my eyes to,
Yeah.
new thinking. I just thought it was
Yeah.
incredibly brilliant. The person who came up with this concept around how people are plugged into each other, but they're plugged in that they don't even realize they're plugged in, and they just go
Yes.
about their day to day. I just thought it was really that was one of my favorite movies I've seen multiple times, and the series, of
Yeah. Me
course.
too. Me too. And what the Matrix did for me is it showed me it wasn't the Matrix movie itself, because the Matrix movies were very, very famous, right? Everybody talks about them,
Mhm.
everybody watched them, like everybody loves them. They're great movies. And because they were great movies, I thought everybody could see themselves in that environment. They're like, "Oh, I'm the one who unplugged." So I just assumed that everybody in the world identified with unplugging and wanting to be their own independent self. And what I discovered as I
Mhm.
became a coach is that that's not true. There's actually a
Mhm.
very large percentage of our society who would prefer to stay plugged in,
Yeah.
who don't want to be unique, who don't want to stand out and do their own thing. That's the part, because I just thought everybody did. Like, I grew up thinking, oh, nobody likes being normal. Nobody wants to be like, everybody wants to be unique and everybody wants to be themselves. And I heard that a lot growing up, and I just thought that's what everybody wanted. And it surprised me. So seeing the Matrix itself wasn't my pivotal point. Seeing the Matrix was brilliant because I thought this exactly describes the world. It wasn't
Mhm.
until I was seeing other people who were like, actually, like that one character who's like who said later on, I just want to get plugged back in.
Yeah.
I just want
He
to be
didn't
plugged
like
back in.
it. Yeah.
Right. And I found that actually there's a large percentage of population that prefer to be that didn't want to
Yeah.
be unplugged.
Yeah.
And that was hard for me because I thought I was going to go around helping people unplug. When it turns out I have to ask them first, because not everybody wants to be unplugged. And so for me, it wasn't the watching the movie itself. It was the juxtaposition of that versus the normal, because I thought everybody wanted to change and it didn't turn out to be the case. So for me, the epiphany came when I realized that actually wanting to unplug is actually unique. Wanting to be my own self is actually unique. And that's when I started leaning into the power of my originality and my uniqueness.
Well,
Right.
and
For
when you
me,
were
that's what it
saying
was.
that, yeah, and but I agree, and I think partly is that I realized that most people, it wasn't that they necessarily wanted to be unplugged; they just wanted to understand how to be a part of of the group, and how do I fit
Yes.
into this environment that I can be whole, that I can feel like myself. That's what I've found a lot of women that I work with. It's how do I be a part of something rather than creating something of their own. They want to be part of something already there. But how do I fit into this model? And that's where I think you're right. Like people, not necessarily do they want to be unplugged, do they feel there's that sense of comfort or belonging when
Belonging,
you're
I think, is what it
plugged
is.
into the group. Where
Yes.
and that's why I talk about having that tribe. But I also believe that just because you have this grouping of people who support you, you don't have to be like everybody else.
Right.
I prefer that I have a group of back, our coach family, where we are different, but we
Yes.
can come together with
Yes.
common thoughts, think how we think, how we feel about certain things, but we still are uniquely different from each other, and we embrace that part. I think a lot of the people
Yes.
that we work with, that there's that fear, like if I have to be somebody different, then I don't know how I can be a part of something bigger while being different. There's that fear. And so that's
Yes.
what
Yeah.
I've found, working with people that I've worked with. There's that fear of, being themselves, releasing things, and then trying to be on their own. And that scares them. That's why I think, like the character in the Matrix asking, like, I just want to get plugged back in. Everything's going to go back to normal, right? I won't remember a thing, and it'll just be that to them is normal.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly it. So the Matrix, I mean, although it was a cultural phenomenon in that it helped us shape our culture from that point forward, I think it was also a commentary on what culture already was.
Mm-hmm.
And because it brought right to the front of our brains, right toward directly to our consciousness what culture already was, we were able to choose from that point forward whether or not we wanted that culture or not. And there was um, a great resolution of people who said, "Yeah, actually, I just want to get plugged back in. I just want to stay in the system because like being part of the. I know what the rules are. When I'm plugged into the matrix, I know what the rules are. I can predict what I'm supposed to do. Go get a job, go have a family, go to university, all that stuff. I got to do all that stuff. And when I do, it adds up to X, Y, and Z. Um, what they don't, and this is what they said in the Matrix movies, in the series as well, is that doesn't work because people don't like that. It doesn't feel real, but it does feel real for enough of us that enough of us want to stay there. So
Mm-hmm.
there are a few of us who want to be the rebels and go around and play with stuff. And in that age group of that 18 to 25, this is the exact description of those two groups I was talking about. There's those people who want to go around and change the world, and there are those people who just want to stay plugged in, who just want to stay out of the system. They don't want to, like, I mean, they want to stay, they don't want to be noticed. They want to be avoided. They want to be under the radar. They want to be, not causing waves. I just want to heal the traumas my parents already gave me and go through life. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to cause waves. And that's the difference. There are those people who want to change the world, and those people who want the world to just accept them for who they are,
Yeah.
right? And and I think that's what creates the changes we see in every evolution of our culture. I believe that's what creates how we move forward and how things keep going, right? I think
Yeah.
that's what decides with
I'm
each
one.
generation where we're going. Go ahead. Or did you freeze? Looks
Yeah.
like you.
Yeah, I froze for a second. So I have a question because I
Sure.
think, yeah, people want to stay the same, but there's also people who want to change. So how do we get them to come together and be okay with the changes they're making, be okay with them staying where they are, being where they are without bucking the norm? Because this comes down to like one of the conversations that we said we wanted to bring to the table, which is let's talk about politics for a minute. Because,
Right.
you've got a generation of young people who want to change the world. They come out, they vote because they know, they go out, they campaign, they they do protesting. They want to make a difference on the political platform. But then you also have those who want to make a difference on the political platform, and for them doing nothing is the difference they're making on the political platform. So
Yes.
I'm just curious what your thoughts are around that. I wanted to bring, I
So,
know this is kind of like a taboo, but
well, let's do the taboo. Let's lean into taboo conversations. I think in the
yeah.
political avenue. So the city I'm staying in right now, the city of Edmonton, years back, decades ago, there was a young man who ran for mayor who was 18.
Mm-hmm.
And he came very close to becoming the mayor of Edmonton. And Edmonton's like a city of like, I don't know, a million and a half people. So it's a fairly substantial city, right? It's the capital of Alberta. So if he were to become mayor of Edmonton, it would have been a pretty significant event. So, he's clearly a part of that group who wants to make a difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are significant numbers of those in every generation. There's a significant numbers of those who want to make a difference, and they do show up to vote, and they do show up to protest, and they do show up to create change. They do show up to cause new things to happen. Um, what the problem is there's not enough of them. They can't convince their peers to show up. The reason that guy didn't get in is because other 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds weren't voting, right? Now, a lot of us, later generation people,
Right.
30 and 40 years old, were voting for him because we just wanted a fresh face in the government, right? Um, but some of us were like, there was still a significant number of us that are like, we need somebody with experience, right? So, but because not enough of the people who were his peers showed up to support him, he didn't actually get to do what he was looking to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which I think is the problem. How do we bring those two together so that they can have the influence? And the and I think this is a magical question. I think this is the secret question, because the activist parts of each generation really, really, really want to change the world. Like, they're filled with passion. So much so that it makes you not wonder why the other half isn't, or why the rest of them aren't filled with
Mm-hmm.
passion, because that one small segment of the population has all the passion, enough for an entire generation. But how do you get them to come together? And I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anybody has the answers. But what I would think, and what my opinion is, what my thoughts on the subject are, is if we can get those passionate people who want to change the world to get some of their peers to do little things that they wouldn't be called out for. So, for example,
Yeah.
um, if the if the passionate generation wanted to do, save the planet, or talk about climate change, or change climate change, they could talk to their peers about not using less plastic, because that's a major change and they'll get called out for it, but um, using like buying their products from more environmentally friendly companies, right? If they could talk to their peers about buying products that are more going to support the place they're trying to go, like the support a more what's the word, sustainable world. If they could convince their peers to buy products from a more sustainable companies and more sustainable organizations, their peers who want to stay under the radar would not necessarily be called out for that, right? So they
Right.
can convince their peers to do little things that those peers wouldn't get called out for, because those peers are trying to stay under the radar, which is one of the reasons why um, one of the reasons I think they don't connect is because the activist parts of each generation, they want their peers to get as passionate as they are,
Yeah.
and so many of them want to stay under the radar. They're just gonna, like, they're almost enemies. Like, they don't talk to each other. So if they wanted to come together, it's about finding something that the generation who wants to stay under the radar can actually do that, but still cause little change. Because most of the ones who want to stay under the radar,
So
they're not
common
against
ground.
change. Yeah, they're not against change. They're just against being seen, right? So if we can, they actually like the change. A lot of times they agree with the activists. They just don't want to do much about it, right? So if we can help them find that common ground, I think we could really start making some big change.
Yeah. Oh, well, people, I am so sorry. I think that is the key
Right.
for
Is that
sure.
common ground?
Absolutely.
Yeah. How's things going on your end? Is that are you getting
I'm
through your
sure I'm
technical
not the only
difficulties?
one. Yeah. So okay, I'm the my tech difficulties are hit and miss. Like I said, this seems
Yeah.
to, for whatever reason, take up a lot of my bandwidth, and I don't know. I'm going live, and then it just seems all of a sudden it happens. But I maybe I'm just not paying attention to it otherwise because I'm not, doing any
Yeah.
type of live streaming. But yeah,
No.
I really like this conversation where we're talking about, making a difference, because that common ground to bring two sides together, because I think there is still a little
Yes.
bit of disconnect,
Yes.
because there's, one person's pointing the finger saying, well, you're like the tree hugger. And then you've got the other guy, well, you're the activist who wants to do this and do that. And like, you want to make waves. And I prefer not to. I prefer to kind of go through life and just enjoy every day and live in gratitude. And those things are all good, but I still feel like there still comes a responsibility of being a human. I think
Yes.
that a lot of people, I think, if you bring this to them and you say, look, you have a responsibility as a human to take care of your planet, to take care of where you live, to treat other people kindly, to do the right thing,
Yes.
to, you know, and not necessarily like to fit into society, but to be a part of society that
Yes. To
adds
participate.
value to the society, to participate. And I think that's where I've heard on both sides, I'm not going to vote because that's my way of saying that I don't like the candidates.
Right.
The other side is saying that your non-voting is actually a one guy you don't want in office, but you don't like his or her opponent, so you won't vote.
Right.
It really is like, how do you get the general so that they can say, you know what, it's not necessarily like, how can we make change? Because I think that is where be able to create culture by making change in their cities, in their towns, in their countries, in their states and
Yes.
provinces, and that by participating in the lower level political process,
Arenas.
voting
Yeah.
for your congress people, voting for your mayors, voting for the people into office that are running your city, and then
Yeah.
helping get those right people in there who can make change, and going from the inside out. I think a lot of the time people are like
Yes.
looking from the top down rather than from the ground up. They're
I
not,
agree.
and so no wonder things come toppling down, right? Because you're not even
Right.
thinking about the foundation. All you're thinking about is putting the roof on, and if
Right.
that's all you're thinking, you're not really, to me, it's like not really like taking into account, okay, well, you put this guy on top, but if he doesn't have like a sound structure, of the people in his cabinet and the people in his political party, no matter what he does, it's not going to work.
Right.
It's just like what's happening in the US right now. Everybody, like the Democrats and the Republicans
Republicans.
have been at war for like
For
20 plus years,
yeah.
over
Yeah.
20
And
years,
decades. Yeah.
you
Exactly.
know?
And I think that's the truth. Is most people don't care about the municipal politics. They don't care about the local politics because they're deciding on taxes for properties I don't even own. They're deciding on where the
Mm-hmm.
roads go for places I don't even travel, right? So they're not that
Mm-hmm.
concerned about what goes on locally. And then locally becomes bigger regionally, and then it becomes nationally, and then it becomes globally. And by the time we care, it's national and global. And by that time, most of those politicians have been cultured through those lower systems where nobody cares, and they've been able to get away with whatever they want because nobody cares. But that's the problem. Like you're saying, if we want
Mhm.
to start having an influence, we can have that influence on the lowest levels by having by showing these politicians at their introductory stages what we will and won't tolerate. Right, when that 18-year-old guy tried to become mayor, if we could show him what we want and don't want from a candidate, if he could hear our voice and hear, yeah, we would have voted you in except this, um, he might have become like a great politician. He might become, and
Mhm.
if we can do a few dozen of those, then suddenly the whole political arena changes.
Exactly.
Right,
And that's
I'm
where they
with you.
need to start creating change. Yeah, create change from the ground up. Build your foundation. Pay attention to the people that are in the lower ranks because that's where they're starting, most of
Yes,
them. And like you say,
that's where
they
they're
make their
learning
way through
their
the
ropes.
ranks.
Yeah,
Exactly. And if you can help be that influence based on that, you can also start voting in the people that are speaking like you, that are wanting change like you do, and have
right.
those people go into the lower level, you know, uh, municipal offices and start creating
Yes,
change. Yeah, you might not travel to the other side of town that often, but you might. So if your
right,
city council is deciding they want to put X amount of dollars over here, that's important. I mean, you look at
right.
even just like infrastructure is like one of the biggest things that they have been avoiding talking about. And you look at the roads, you look at the bridges. They've
Yeah,
said I travel a lot, so when I'm driving, there's been times we've gone under bridges, and I've been like looking up, thinking, "Holy crap!" Like I
right.
hope that this gets fixed someday because
I hope this doesn't come
how
down on my
long does
head.
it
Right.
exactly. Like I have no idea
Yes.
because you start thinking at the roads, all the potholes, all of the
Yes.
cracks in the road, and those have caused sinkholes. People don't realize these parts of these things in politics, this level, this lower level tier is equally important as the highest office because that
Right.
guy in the high office might have been 40 years in politics and he started
Right.
in office as a city councilman. So
And yeah,
that's where I
exactly.
wanted
And
to bring this.
if we would have been able to get our voices heard when he was listening to us then, because when they are in local politics, they are willing to listen because there's only a few hundred people
Yeah,
or a few thousand people they can listen to, right?
yeah. And see,
When
this
they
is
get
what
into the
I
big
love
scene.
about politics being, yeah, and this is what I love about politics being able to talk about it from this point of view instead of
Yes.
looking at it like, oh, well, my guy's in office and his cabinet, and I
This
don't,
side is right
now
or
that he's
that
in
side
office,
is
he's not
right.
doing,
Yeah.
yeah, they're not doing anything. Well, of course not, because it's become such it's like my way or the highway mentality instead of the people who voted them into office, the right
Right.
people, I should say, that voted them into office, because it's the working girl, the working guy that is looking for them to make change. But then you get people who are uh, trying to get political gain, or so
Yes.
through their donations that are getting the most
Way more. Yeah.
notice, meaning they're getting their needs met. And so that's why there's so much discord. So this would be really great if young people could start talking, not just amongst themselves, but amongst themselves, and include those of us who are older to help us see their ideas for the future from a point
Because
of
we
view
all
like,
can have an
hey,
influence if we just got more involved in
we
local
can.
politics.
Exactly. And it wasn't something
Yeah.
I was ever taught, and I
Nobody
wish
is.
someone had taught me that. Yeah,
This
it
sounds
would
like
be
a greater
really great.
conversation we're going to have at a later date, I think.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
think we're going to have
I
to
just think it
talk
would
more
be
about this.
really, yeah, I think it would be a lot of fun. Now, one of the things that you have here is you talked about, you said as they enter like the workforce or start families, whatever they create, they go to war. They champion causes. They don't simply influence the culture of the world. They create, direct, and choose it with passion. Only unfiltered commitment can. So, give us an idea around that, like where you were going with this particular piece of our talk, because I know you're
So,
saying they're creating that.
right. So what I'm talking about is I'm talking about now this portion of the generation that is passionate about their beliefs. And some of them, and there's the different examples. There's the workforce. They start families. They create art. They go to war. They champion causes. They do all kinds of things, but they don't do them because, you know, somebody told me this is cool and I think it's kind of neat. They do them because they think that's where they want to make change, right? When somebody starts a family and they're one of these activist types, they don't start a family because somebody told them, you need love and you need a girlfriend or you need a boyfriend. They start a family because like they want to change how families are seen in the world. They have a specific image of what they think a family could be, and they want to raise that family to show people you can have that family. When people get into the workforce and they're part of these activists, they don't take a job because it's going to give them an income. They take a job that's going to make a statement about who they are, right? And it's the same thing when we go to war, when we champion causes or create art. I mean, it's the same thing. We do those things for a purpose if we're part of that activist group. Now, not all of us are, as I mentioned before. They're actually a minority in every generation. But when they do it, they're doing it for a purpose, and those are the ones who have the influence. Like
Mm-hmm.
when certain soldiers, activist soldiers, join the army to create change, most of the other soldiers are just going there to serve their time because they're looking for some benefit or other. So those few who are looking to create change can rattle feathers. They can make
Mm-hmm.
things change. They can make their voices heard, right? If we go into a job because it has an identity for me, we can actually add culture to that company. We can we can promote the benefits of working for that company. We can represent who they want to hire, right? We
Mm-hmm.
can be the reason they succeed. And if we just want to stay under the radar, that's great too. And like I said before, each of us has something we're generally passionate about, and then the rest of the things we just want to stay under the radar with. So
Yeah.
focus on those areas that you're passionate about, work with other people who are passionate about those things you don't care about, and learn how to participate in small ways to help them achieve their goals. They'll participate in small ways to help you achieve yours, and we will all become a much stronger influence on the world because we do create passion and culture because we just and the end I say with unfiltered commitment, because the passion that comes from unfiltered commitment is the greatest passion that creates change. What I mean by unfiltered commitment is the only corruption we've had so far is our childhood and teenage years. And while that is significant, as we get into the adulthood, we try and act as if those things didn't happen. We try and get into the world and make change as the fresh new adult, as this fresh
Mm-hmm.
new influence. We have these beliefs and we really think that they're important. You know, um, I was talking to somebody recently where they have a very, very specific idea on what their wedding's going to look like. And they're getting very, very angry because most of the people who they want support from aren't supporting them. And I tried to help them see, you could have a different kind of perspective on things. And they're like very, very passionate about what they want their wedding to look like. And they're willing to put it off for days, months, even years to get that. That's
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's got a specific image, and I respect that. I value that. That's what creating culture looks like, right?
Yeah.
That sort of unfiltered passion that isn't filtered by decades of experience, that isn't tamed and tempered by experience. It is just raw passion. That's what creates change.
Wow.
As I mentioned before, it's not always good change, but it is change.
Yep. Yep. Well, we filled an hour, but I
Because of
wasn't
course we did.
surprised by that. I'm not surprised by that, but it's been an interesting conversation. Definitely, I think one we can revisit at some point. But yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, even with all of the internet hiccups. But it's been really great. I hope that you all got a little bit of a different perspective, or at least it kind of gave you a few aha moments of your own, not based on our
Yeah.
opinion, but maybe just made you think and something hit, something landed. And if that's
Yeah.
the case, we'd love to hear from you.
We
Let us
would.
know what you think. If you haven't yet followed the channel, follow us, share it around, bring your friends, click on the bell so that you get notified that when we go live.
Yes.
We are going to be
Yes.
taking a break a couple weeks. We
Yep.
are going to not be back until, I believe, the 9th of September. So we're going to take 2 weeks.
The next 2 Fridays we're not doing live.
Yeah, we are not going to be live, but that's okay, right? Close out the summer. You enjoy your time with your family.
Yes.
I'll enjoy my time. I'm going on vacation. So yeah,
Yay.
it's going to be great. But yeah, I know, right? But yeah, so thank you, everyone. We appreciate you. We are really excited to continue this conversation at a later date, and we're going to be coming to you with more conversations.
Way more stuff.
Not necessarily politically viewed, but that's okay.
Right.
You got to be able to be okay to talk about some of the uncomfortable conversations. Listen, Andy and I haven't been around. Have been around the block a little bit, I should say. We are not new to having controversial conversations.
That's correct.
Between the two of us. And we can come together with, an understanding and a mutual respect for the other's opinion, if it is, especially sometimes when it doesn't match. And that is okay. Right?
We love these conversations.
But yes,
I love these conversations.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you for participating. Thank you for watching. Thank you for enjoying our content. As Leslie said, like and share and comment and do all the wonderful things, and we will see you in 3 weeks' time.
Yeah, we will see you guys soon. All right, have a great
Bye-bye.
rest of your day. A couple of weeks, or I should say, yeah, you're right. 3 weeks. We'll see you. All right. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.